May 18th, 2016. And as is tradition, we're going to start with the stand-up. And I don't think Ben is here, so I think we move on to Nikita.
It's nothing significant, I think. So let's just skip to Chris.
Again, nothing significant. On to Colin.
So reviewing issues and pull requests, some stuff with libuv. I had a meeting with Saul from libuv about doing releases down there. That's about it. So next would be Evan.
Yeah, I pushed out the 6.2.0 release last night. That's about it. Next is Jeremiah.
Hello, I did some work on the Node.js GitHub bot last week, and it now automatically labels most JavaScript subsystems that we have. And additionally, Johan has been working with myself and Philip to get the Jenkins set up so that it can tell our GitHub bot to post statuses, so actual like CI statuses directly into GitHub's API, like Travis would for our pull requests. And then this week I've been working to resolve new and long-standing standard IO woes with interleaving on TDYs and writes dropped on processed exit and all that fun stuff. Next is Fedor.
Yeah, hello. I don't have anything significant on my plate this time. I was just fixing bugs and reviewing pull requests. Next is James.
Yeah, PRs, doc updates, refactoring stuff, just kind of head down into the code. The next is Josh.
Yep, I continue to do a little bit of work advancing the tracing and diagnostics working group. Did some initial implementations of tracing system or module, and been looking into trace event from V8. Next is Michael.
I did a small enhancement to allow us to run tests multiple times for stress testing, finding intermittent issues, misreviews, comments, and lands. Helped identify an issue with test npm install. Did a sniff test of the PPC binaries that are being built as part of the releases, and working with IBM team members on postmortem API and Node as a shared library work that is ongoing. Next is Julian.
I don't think he's here, and I don't think Michael Rogers is either. So I think next is Brian White.
Basically, all I worked on was performance improvements in core, mostly HTTP stuff the other week, and most recently string decoder stuff. But other than that, just the same old reviewing PRs and issues. Next is Ali.
Ali, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Okay, Ali is here. I'm just going to read off what he wrote in the document, if that's okay with everyone. I worked with the DevTools team to open the PR for V8 Inspector, and working with the V8 team on a few node-related issues, Contextify, foreign function interface, LTS, etc. And next up is Alexis.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I finally fixed the issue with row mode console on Windows that was affecting many users with the 6.0 release, or it was released in 6.2. We also blessed the Visual C++ build tools for native module development. Also been working with my team to port benchmarks. There are a few benchmarks that are not working cross-platform, so we're porting those. And then I reviewed a few issues and pull requests. That's all for me. Next is Bert, but he's not here. So next is Rod, but we cannot hear Rod. Seth Thompson, also not here. Shigeki doesn't seem to be here. Stephen Loomis.
Okay, so I updated the data behind. I think I've been on the last set update, but anyway, I updated the data behind the full ICU NPM module because people are picking up Node 6.2.0. So I didn't have IC57 data posted, so that's now fixed. And also there's a restart meeting of the Intel working group after a couple months hiatus. Up is Trevor.
Submission review, working async wrap like usual. Nothing much worth a mention. I don't have the list in front of me.
Rich would be next.
Was I audible when I was speaking before? My little
Yes.
I can hear you now.
I'm grayed out, but I guess I still get to talk.
Did we lose Rich?
Hi, I think someone muted me or something. Maybe I muted myself. Hi. So, addressing flaky tests, taking some non-CI tests because they do things like go out to the internet and trying to modify them to make them so they can run in CI with varying degrees of success. Wrote a few tests for API calls that aren't currently covered in CI anywhere. And I've been pondering a way to check new tests for flakiness before landing. This was brought about by a couple of relatively new tests being a source of some painful, more than merely intermittent failures on CI. And I've been, when I need some mindless drudgery and Git spelunking, I've been adding some YAML data to API docs about when various APIs were introduced, and I recommend anybody who's bored do that. Shigeki showed up while the stand-up was happening, so maybe he wants to tell us what he's been up to. I'm not sure.
Sorry for my late. I'm working my internal work for this week, so nothing so special. Thanks. So who's next?
I think that's it, although it looks like
we have Bradley
added himself. So go ahead, Bradley.
Sure. So I guess I wasn't here last week, but I've been talking with WhatWG and TC39 about their concerns with the module proposal and what they want instead with their counter proposal. And I also talked with Chakra Core, SpiderMonkey, and V8 about what problems they're going to have implementing our proposal. So can talk more about this later. That's it for me.
Okay, that's it for the stand-up. At this point, it'll be who chairs when Rod is absent? Is that Jeremiah or James or
So
something?
Whoever wants
really
to.
depends.
Rod is trying to speak and maybe can hear us, but just FYI.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I know he's on, and I know he can hear us. We just can't hear him.
Now is the perfect time to say anything you want about Rod.
Nothing but love for Rod.
We can just go on from here.
Let's just go ahead and let's have the meeting.
You want to do the review of last meeting, and I'll get the rest of the meeting notes set up.
Okay. Who feels comfortable doing the review of last meeting?
I'll do it.
Go ahead.
So All right, so we talked about reverting 5950. That was PR 6537. Based on the discussion last week, that was revised to put the new behavior. This is the sim-linked peer dependency change. To put the new behavior behind a flag. Did that, got that landed, and now in 6.2, the preserving symlinks behavior is now behind a command line flag, and we're using the old behavior by default. We talked about refactoring constants. That landed. We talked about refactoring the changelog. Got those landed, but have not yet pulled those back to the older release lines. And then we had a request for discussion around the modules stuff. So that was our last meeting.
Can I be heard? Can anyone hear me?
I can now.
Yep. Yep.
Woohoo.
Hooray, all is well with the world.
Rich, I think you're actually doing a pretty good job of leading the meeting, so why don't you just continue to do that? Hey?
Well, I think it would be, I think that would be your job.
Oh my. Not so gracefully done.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Let's go then. So that was the review of the last meeting. Did we want to do the module stuff? Bradley's on here. Do we have Bradley?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Let's talk about modules first.
Okay, so not much coming from counter proposals, just kind of we stated our problems and haven't really heard much back from them in terms of technical stuff. TC39 is still split. Looks like there are 3 people who don't want the file extension, and the rest are either neutral or okay with it. On to that topic, still getting more proposals from various sources, but it's mostly died down. In general, people just see the flood of responses going out and have stopped giving out existing proposals, which I think we've covered just about every avenue I've heard of. I got a hold of engine implementers, and I'm currently talking with Young-Q from Chakra and Adam Klein from V8 because they're going to have to make a slightly unpleasant change for them to support importing values, like because they were expecting only to ever hook up source code directly to source code. So I'm kind of working that through with them and approaches they can take. They don't like it, but doable. So I don't think we're blocked there. Let's see what else. I think those are the big things. There's agreement that we should add path searching back to the proposal. So the browser path resolution algorithm in the HTML spec doesn't do things like search for index.js, and it doesn't look at package.json files in directories. TC39 and WhatWG agreed it would be okay if we added that back to the spec. So that would make it match require, which is much nicer on our end and much less breakage. Also searching for file extensions. So less breakage is better, and then I'm going to PR the modules proposal unless anybody has a disagreement there. Yeah, I think that's it.
Rod, we can't hear you if you're talking.
No, sorry, that's fine. Right, we need to unmute. Now, there was a call. Who else has been involved in that other than Jeremiah? other people have been involved with this discussion?
I think from
On this
CTC,
side?
only Jeremiah has been involved.
Okay, staying strong, Jeremiah. We all thank you for taking this burden, both Jeremiah and Bradley. Stay strong. And we appreciate that. We appreciate the effort that you're putting in, both, particularly you, Bradley. So thanks for staying connected and pushing for our interests. But yeah, just please let us know if we need to be more in sync with discussions, if we need more presence there. This is a hard topic that a lot of us are probably not that inclined to, want to have to engage in because we're so busy. But there's obviously points at which it would be much more preferable to have more of us fully engaged. So please let us know if those points come.
I will, but I think discussion's mostly dying down. So.
But we are getting close to the point of no return of implementation. Is the risky thing. So to get optimal outcomes, we sort of need to make sure action happens soon.
Yes. So, however, we can't implement until the engines implement stuff for us. But I think only Chakra is capable of even parsing right now.
Okay. Yeah, but as soon as one engine goes ahead and implements, then it's like that spec is fixed in stone, and we're just gonna have to put up with it. So, okay, let's move on. Standard IO woes it's listed as. So we've got two issues listed here: 6773 and 6816. And I think there's a few more, but this is an ongoing drama, and I would like both James and Jeremiah to talk to this, and others who have been involved. So James, can you go first?
Yeah, so we've had this, just as some background, we've had this long-standing issue apparently of IO on standard out, standard error, either being blocking or non-blocking, apparently, depending on which platform you're running on. A recent update to libuv didn't cause the problem, but it made the problem more apparent, particularly on OSX. And Jeremiah could probably talk to the specific details as to why better than I could. But what ended up happening is that version 6, when we released it, quite a few command line tools built on Node started experiencing issues with either truncated output or interleaved SDR and SDR out output, and a number of other things. And there are two fundamental problems. One, we're not flushing the SDIO on exit, process exit. When process exit is called, it leaves quite a bit of data still in the buffer, in the libuv buffer. And then all our writes are non-blocking on certain platforms. So it's been kind of a investigation to see where exactly the problem is, where it was happening, what was causing it, how to go about fixing it. Then and on larger discussion is, should we just go ahead and make STD out and STD error blocking by default in Node and just on all platforms?
Not quite.
Okay, I'm going off to this where I saw what the discussion was yesterday. So this is a variety of different issues that are kind of at play, and I think we're just starting to get really a handle of what the issues actually were. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeremiah for the rest of it.
So yeah, I'm just going to read some of what. So Soul has been investigating this on the libuv end, and so sort of what's happened is that before IOJS 1.0, libUE started to reopen /dev/tty if a given file descriptor referred to a TDY, and it then falls back to blocking lights if that couldn't be achieved. So that's been around for a while, but that doesn't actually quite work with OS X because KQ and poll don't handle all file descriptors on OS X, so we use select. But recently we started reopening TTY name instead of /dev/tty, and apparently that works with KQ on Windows. So now all of a sudden it's non-blocking when we didn't expect it to be, even though we previously had sort of expected it to be, but the effects of that were never apparent. Now that gains apparent effects mostly on Mac because the OS level buffer, which is hard-coded, is hard-coded to be 1 kilobyte in size for this sort of thing, and so writes become chunked and truncate very quickly. And when you only have to, when it's only 1 kilobyte of data, it's small enough that if you are doing any sort of standard out and standard error at roughly the same time, you can sometimes get the information mixed up. And that becomes a really big problem if you're using any ANSI escape codes to control what the output should look like, because then you get output that just looks completely messed up. And this is then also a problem with the longer standing issue that we've already known about with pipes, where piping would truncate input if you closed it. However, that used to only occur in situations where it was a lot larger of a size, as far as I can tell. And so now it seems to be that that truncation of anything except for the first chunk happens with much smaller sized data. That's sort of like a summary of the issue or issues at hand. Does anyone have a question about that before I go on to the actual PRs?
I think that it also sometimes causes the error not to be printed if the process prints an error from the JavaScript.
Right. So, yeah, I suppose our error stuff goes to the same thing, and so that can get truncated too, which is pretty bad.
I have a deja vu of this issue from 4 years ago. I don't know if that helps. I posted a link on your issue about the old issue.
Yeah, I have a deja vu as well.
Yes. It used to be blocking on all platforms except for Windows. That's why we did the set blocking thing on Windows. So maybe there's a regression there.
Right. So as far as I understand, it became unpractical to do blocking, mostly in the case of pipes where you're piping your standard out to somewhere else for communications. And that's because the pipe buffer is almost always very small. So the two things that I have proposed right now is one, to flush standard IO on process exit. And the second is to make standard IO blocking, but only for TDYs, so terminals.
Yeah, I think flushing on the exit or waiting for it to flush on exit would be ideal.
Yeah, it definitely sounds reasonable, but we also probably need to consider threads because they will continue running on this. And also about the case that Nikita has asked about, I think errors are currently printed with fprint from the C++. So if the Node.js process crashes, the error should be flashed to std error.
I have a test case for that, where the error does not get printed when it should.
Okay, well, that's interesting, but it's probably unrelated to this one, as far as I can tell. It may be related to like reopening TTY in libUV, but not to the JS side of the thing.
Right. I think we print our errors from C++, so it probably does fflush itself directly there to standard error.
What's the concern with threads? Are we actually printing errors from threads, and how would we solve that problem? You have to synchronize exit of threads.
No, we are not printing. I'm just renting, basically. It's just rent, and yeah, it's like a behavior change, you know. So right now, when the process crashes or exits, everything gets killed. But if we will flush and I don't know if it will block, the threads will continue running. So it may be different, but it may be not.
Right. So the aim for like any other code that might be there is to make sure that no other, either to only flush that and not even run the event loop, or to kill any other libuv handles except for standard IO and just flush that. So there are some concerns with these, which I should mention. Do note, though, in the current state, we have effectively broken a lot of people without intending to have done so. So for setting the handle to blocking, that may cause issues if you're running a remote TDY. I don't know yet. And then for flushing standard IO, libuv does not particularly want to implement what we would perhaps need to flush it synchronously. So we may need to actually walk through all the handles, close everything that's not standard IO, and then tell it to flush and shut down when it's done, which would not exactly be instantaneous. Although if that's, I don't know, perhaps not very favorable at all, we might be able to do something else.
So, has an issue been opened in libuv yet for this too?
Yes, I did open a PR with the example code. I should make one other note. If you actually look at the man docs for exit 3, you will note that, at least on my platform, which is OS X, but I suspect most others, it actually will attempt to flush standard IO, but as far as I understand, are dealing with it in a different way, so that doesn't actually work. But normally, running exit from C++ would actually do this to begin with.
Well, in this case, it's the fact that the data is still in libuv's buffers. It hasn't actually gotten to the point where the C exit would be able to actually flush those.
Right, or it possibly could be in Node's buffers. I still need to check that, but I don't think it should be in Node's buffer by that time.
Yeah, in all the experimentation I've done, I haven't been able to find a case where it was in Node's buffers. But that doesn't, that was hardly science testing. So.
Yeah, my experimentation was the same. The person who originally wrote the patch put the code for it in there anyway, but I still need to experiment with that part.
So it sounds like the path to dealing with this is kind of long still. I was hoping that we were just dealing with minor disagreements about details now, but we're actually still dealing with discovery, aren't we?
For one of the issues, the other one, so the fix that's going to fix most of the apparent problems is to make TDY is blocking. There's some disagreement if we should be doing that. I haven't been brought any cases where that would actually break something or actually affect any application. Also note that if you're making applications on a cross-platform, you're going to have to deal with this on Windows anyways. So.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, you raised that question to me, I guess, in one of the threads, and and I didn't answer it directly, because I did want to just stop and take some time to think about it. And Off the top of my head, I also cannot think of any cases that should break if we just make the TTY blocking by default. However, there's a lot of uses of Node and of the platform up to this point that I'm not familiar with. So for me, it just makes me very uncomfortable to make that change without having an escape hatch of saying, okay, if you really do need it to be non-blocking, here's how you do it, and have that be a supported API. I understand the pushback. Say if we don't have a concrete use case for that, then why add it? The concrete use case for me would be the use cases I'm not aware of, which is quite a few.
I'm inclined to agree with that, particularly when if we are shipping a platform that does one thing, and then we want to change it, and even if we can't think of how people might be using, taking advantage of the way it works now, the fact that we are shipping it means that it could be used out there in some weird way, and as soon as we break it, it's broken for them, and we may not even hear about that, but the pain could be real. So I'm inclined to agree that if we are shipping a mode that we want to break, then if possible, we should provide that escape hatch to let them still take advantage of that behavior that we may not understand exactly how they're using. It's like the security revert thing, just providing that safety hatch.
Right. So there's a couple things there. So it's always blocking on Windows to begin with. It's always so far been blocking on Mac, even though we haven't intended that. The only platform that would actually change in like the long term then would be TDYs on Linux,
which is the most
also,
common deployment platform.
Right.
Right, but it's not what most people run CLI apps on, as far as I can tell. That might not be true.
Yeah, but I mean,
so you can actually
blocking on Windows.
Uncertainty is the issue.
Right. The other thing is that you can actually change the behavior. You need to access the handle to do it, but that API is already being used, and we can't just get rid of it anyways. So if people actually end up needing to use that, we could do something about it. I'm not against adding a flag though, if that's what everyone would prefer.
So it's blocking on Windows on pipes because we explicitly set it to blocking, right? That's when we created that API, I think, when we exposed that set blocking API. And it was done at the time because Windows pipes were the only case where it was non-blocking. So back then, it used to be blocking by default on all the other platforms. So that just tells me that it used to work without issue by being blocking by default.
Right.
That's true, but there's been a period of time where it's been working a different way. And so
that's not actually true though, because it's sort of platform dependent, right? It was never actually non-blocking on Mac, even though we expected it to be.
But how about on Linux?
On Linux, it appears to be changed to non-blocking sometime around IOJS v1, as far as I recall. I might be wrong on that.
I think we should probably summon Bert and Ben who have more background on this issue. I used to have some notes about it, but I need to find them. It's been a while.
The fun thing on Linux is that, I mean, even though it's been non-blocking, the issue really hasn't been a problem because its buffer is so much larger than OSX's.
So
it's
the Linux
almost
buffer
been working by accident.
Yeah, the Linux buffer is 64 kilobytes in size, which you're pretty unlikely to get by doing like individual writes to say console.log or something. But the OSX buffer is like 1 kilobyte.
So like I said, I agree with you, Jeremiah, that there's probably no use case that we could reasonably come up with for where switching to blocking by default would break. And you're right that we have, the ability to, somebody could just do _handle set blocking false if they really need it. But we've been telling people consistently, and we've been trying to get people to not use those underscored properties, right? And to turn around and just, keep saying, okay, well, don't use it in this case, use it in this case, is just adds confusion. So if we're going to say to anyone, if you really need it, here's a way of doing it, we should at least provide an API, a public supported API that does it. Even if we turn around and say, but you really shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it can be something really obscure, like it can be an obscure thing like an environment variable that is, it's just tucked away somewhere in the docs somewhere. Like there's this thing, it'll do this thing. It's not going to be particularly cross-platform solid, but it's there.
Okay, I might go the environment variable path then.
Whichever works, and even if it's documented, in big bold letters in the docs, hey, you probably shouldn't use this. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, like you should never need this, but just in case.
One example might be that shaving microseconds off shutdown time because maybe someone cares that much about it. Because this does still impact Linux users through process managers, like we heard that, like systemd users are being caught by this. So there's
being
potential.
caught by what?
Well, systemd users are being caught by the fact that they're not catching all output, the standard error output in their logs. Now.
Right. Are you talking about when the process shuts down fast or under normal conditions?
Shut down. Like,
okay.
Throw an error, shut down, you've lost your logs. But maybe there's someone out there that actually appreciates the really fast shutdown, and I don't care what the logs are. Who knows?
Right. I guess that's one change. The other change is the blocking. Is there any case where potentially somebody out on the TTY could do something that says, okay, when you do your blocking right, you're just going to hang there forever? I think I've seen that with, pipes and stuff if you redirect it, but I know you've said you were excluding that.
Yeah, another thing, all of the issues that I've encountered with that kind of problem have all been on pipes. I've never heard of an issue around TTY with that. And it may just be lack of, I'm just missing something, but I'd be extremely surprised.
I think there could be one slight problem with blocking writes. If I remember correctly, it was raised a long time ago when we first discussed this. I think the scripts could be slower on a command line on OS X and maybe on Linux as well. So basically, whenever the script will print stuff, it will be slowed down by the console.log. I think, well, at least I remember something similar to this. I'm not sure how much it is a problem right now, or if it's a problem at all. Just, yeah.
In theory, at some point, if there's something that slows the consuming of the TTY data, it would back up into your app, right? Which is, I think, what you're saying, just as in the non-terminal case, but just the regular case, it takes some time to get the characters out.
Right. So keep in mind that like we could add something for maybe like Linux for that to work. That doesn't really work on Mac though, because the buffer size is hard coded and it's tiny, and you're like 100 times more likely to run into the issue where your standard IO just gets munged together and you can't tell what's actually going on in your TTY then.
Okay.
Okay, I'll look at adding an environment variable for that. Is anyone like, I mean, if I add an option to similarly for flushing on exit, does anyone object to us actually closing all the other handles and keeping the event loop open for it to flush itself rather than trying to get a fast shutdown into libuv?
I think it may not work. I think it may not work as good as you expect it to be. So yeah, every time we try to deal with all open handles, it turned out to be not really great. But yeah, I don't mind if you'll try it. Maybe it will work out.
Have you had a chance to benchmark it yet, Jeremiah?
No, I haven't actually tried that approach yet.
And closing all the open handles is needed because it's...
Otherwise, you could have other JS code or similar stuff that gets called and flushed or other things written.
I think
Server
instead
still going off.
Do
I think-
standard out and standard in, you mean?
Okay, I think instead of like closing all the handles, we should introduce a new API in libuv that will flush the data synchronously for the specific DTY. I think we need to discuss it with Saul and see what he thinks about it. Maybe it should be simpler.
Yeah, I discussed that with Sewell, and he didn't seem to like it very much. But maybe we can take that discussion back there and move on here.
Okay.
And of course, we have the option of floating the patch that does this in libuv. Obviously, that's not ideal, but if we need to, we need to.
Yeah, I think we'd want more discussion before we consider that, right?
Just on the question of urgency here, I know NPM particularly we're making a big fuss about this, but are we getting a sense of urgency from them and others on this, and are we concerned about that at all, or are we more confident that we have to? I'm not suggesting that we speed things up. I'm just wondering what the community urgency is that we're picking up here. Has NPM picked up on the difficulty and the nuances of this? And are they? And Jeremiah, I think you went on their CLI team call. How's that going? And is anyone else picking up signals from out there on GitHub and other places about pain from these issues?
Yeah, so it's not strictly NPM. NPM is run very often, and because it has a progress bar that uses ANSI escape codes, it's run into very easily on Mac. There's problems where, for example, people think packages weren't actually published because the output gets overridden. And then there's some other areas. Someone else from a different package, David, I think is the package name, came and originally reported the issue to us. Anything that uses yargs for arguments management kind of has issues. I can definitely foresee issues in tools that I've written in the past. Yeah, generally not great if you're running CLI tools on Mac, and it may or may, if it may produce standard out and standard error at the same time, you'll have problems.
I've been asked a few times about it this week at Enterprise JS last night, things like that. It's definitely on people's radars.
And then the secondary issue of truncation after process exit has been on a number of people's radars since sometime last year when we originally discovered it, but it was less important then.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's not much we can do in this call, but yeah, let's keep this on the agenda then. If we don't get it solved in GitHub, in the meantime, but we should move on because I thought this is going to be a much quicker meeting than it is. Okay, so come on, browser. Okay, James, I think this is yours. Issue number 6749, moving sync write stream to internal FS.
This one should be super simple. We have this sync write stream that I actually noticed it looking into the I/O issues. It's sitting there in the FS module right now with a big note saying don't use this. It's only here to support our STDIO uses when we're outputting into a file. But it's been sitting there in the FS module with very little reason to actually be there. So moved it into an internal module. But of course, a couple of users went out and found it, and there's a couple of modules out there that at least reference it. Now, Nikita, I think you went through and did a quick check and found that the uses that are there are not very significant. But then, it's just because it is being used, it's just, let's go ahead and add a hard deprecation for it. We just need to make sure that there are no objections, and if there are, if we want to wait or what.
So we're only at this point just adding the deprecation, and then we'll move it later on. Is that the?
I moved it and then put an alias in FS that points, that imports it and points to it.
Okay. Take it to GitHub then, I guess. If anyone's got any thoughts on that, I think I've provided mine. But
so I think this will become more interesting with the next issue.
okay, let's do that then, because the next issue is interesting. It is interesting. 6413, which is reverting the FS add temporary fix for reevaluation support. This goes back to graceful FS and the stuff we did in there. James, take it away.
Right. So when we landed that hack 2 months ago, it was under the understanding that after 6.0 went out, we'd revert it. So after 6.0 went out, I went ahead and opened the PR to say, when are we ready to go ahead and revert this? The challenge with it is that this, being able to revert this is actually blocking other changes like the sync right stream change. Because if we went and pulled that deprecation out, pulled that code out, it could actually break things when people reevaluate FS, graceful FS or whatever it is. So we would need to get this revert landed before we could revert the previous issue and before we can make other similar kinds of changes in the FS module. So at this point, there's a class of changes we're not able to make in FS should we need to because of this thing now.
What other changes do we actually need to make? Because so the thing is, I think it may be better if we wait until V8 and land it in V8. So or just wait even longer into the V7 cycle, let a couple more people get off of it and make sure we're doing it then. And the thing is, like right now, there's nothing super urgent that we need to internalize for FS. So I'm not seeing the reason to do it immediately.
No, I'm fine with waiting if that's what we want to do. I'm more, for me, it's not the specifics of this, like the sync FS or the sync right stream change. That alone is not critical enough to try to push this through right now. Right. My concern would be if there was something, and it's a hypothetical concern. So you're likely right that it's probably.
If anything was to come up that we would actually like, this would be really good to internalize like as soon as possible, I think we would just go ahead and land it.
So, with that, I mean, straw poll folks here. I mean, do we want to wait until V8 to do this? Do we want to revert this before V7? If we do want to do it in V7, when between now and October do we want to do it? Or we just play it by ear?
Or we could just land it now if I'm like the only person that objects to it.
I object as well. But it's a soft objection. It's like, well, we did have a lot of breakage when we first did this. So let's take it slowly, kind of thing. But I am actually happy to go with the crowd on this one if others feel, that it's just not a big deal.
I like, so I totally fall in with your reasoning, Jeremiah, on wanting to wait and it only forcing this if there's something that we absolutely need to internalize. Because right now it doesn't seem like there's a super compelling case for needing internalization there. So, well put. I agree.
Yeah, that being said, like I think we would do this in V8 and version 8 because we kind of said we have. So once we get to like that sort of point, more people have moved off, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I'll put both this and the sync right stream one on the V8 milestone though when we actually get V8 milestone created. And
V8 is going to be crazy when we're talking about the version of V8 shipping in Node V8.
Yeah.
We need to make sure to call it version 8.
Maybe we just skip V8 and then go V9.
No. I
Pull
I
Microsoft.
absolutely want us to try to get. I want us to get V8, V8, and V8. We have to do that. I mean, that's a given.
And capitalization will become really important then.
Of course.
Well, V8, the triple equal sign release.
Yeah. Okay. So let's quickly call for any questions or comments from anyone listening into the live stream. Please leave comments either on the live stream page or in the GitHub issue or IRC in the Node Dev channel, preferably.
So I actually have question/comment about the symlink behavior that we saw a couple weeks ago. I really don't think we should use canonical paths to refer to real files. So I can kind of wax poetically about this and maybe offline. So I'm wondering what the exact use case and why we started doing that is.
Okay, are you referring to the old behavior or the new behavior?
I think the old behavior is superior to the new behavior. So I'm wondering what the new behavior came from.
The new behavior was implemented specifically because of the symlink peer dependency problem. That it was impossible for peer dependencies to find each other when one of those happened to be a symlink at a different route. The change that was made was an attempt to fix that, right? And all of our CI and all of our system testing, everything said, oh, everything's green, it's great. So, went ahead and made the change. And then everything broke. In 6.2, last week, I landed a change that put the new behavior behind a flag and restored the old behavior. So from 6.2 onward, we're using the pre-V6 behavior by default. And someone would have to explicitly pass in, -- preserve symlinks command line flag in order to use the new behavior. The people that would primarily be doing that would be the people who actually care about the symlink peer dependency issue. Now, if later on we can find a path that we can do both of these things, right, without having a flag, then great. If not, then having the flag there is probably just fine.
Yeah, because I can tell you some of our modules broke without peer dependencies. So we can talk about that offline, maybe?
Yeah, but from 6.2 on, the behavior should be what you were seeing before 6.0. So that issue should be resolved. If you're still seeing some issues, let me know.
Okay.
No questions so far on the live stream. I did pose the question early in the chat. None in Node Dev either.
Okay, let's wrap this up then. So we're going to move into a private section for just CTC members straight after this. But thanks everyone for attending the meeting, and we'll see you all next week.